Welcome to the Butterfly Effect, brought to you by Moss Adams. I'm Chris Horner. This is stage 16 of the Tour de France. 170 kilometers, about 105 miles in length, 3 big climbs followed by 1 short, explosive Category 4 800-meter climb that'll summit about 7 kilometers from the finish line. Normally, I wouldn't even bother bringing that climb up, but it held some action at the finish of today's stage, so we'll get to that later. Right away, Casper Asgreen, the Kunit Quickstep's on a mission. He'll ride the first 50K of this stage basically solo. He'll get some company with Cattaneo and Michael Kwiatkowski. They'll stay together for only about 10-15 kilometers. And Asgreen, when they're going down one of the crazy wet descents, will exit the road on a tight right-hand bend turn. He'll exit the road just as the left turn is starting. So he'll exit left, he'll shoot through the wet grass, somehow amazingly hold his bike up, miss the rock wall, pop back onto the street and keep the bike up. We were in awe watching it on TV. Christian Vandervelde and I were just out of our seats when we were watching it, and I was amazed how he was able to save it. Michael Kwiatkowski rolls up to him, gives him one of those looks like, oh man, you just saved it. I can't believe it. So they get back going, but the problem is the race has never stopped going for the whole 80 kilometers. Those 3 will get brought back, and at 85 kilometers to go, the next group of 3 will get a chance at winning today's stage. 3 riders get away. Chris Juul Jensen from Bike Exchange, Fabien Dubé, and my old teammate Jan Bakelins are up the road. Behind them, 11 guys are chasing them. And with 75 kilometers to go, Patrick Conrad attacked the group of 10 and go solo across to the 3 leaders up front. For most of the rest of the stage, it's about a 30-second gap between the group of 10 behind and now the group of 4 up front. With 36 kilometers to go, Patrick Conrad's on a mission. He drops his breakaway companions and he solos over the 3rd categorized climb on today's stage. Behind, Gaudu and Sony Cabrelli are going over the KOM after Patrick Conrad. They're only 20-25 seconds behind Patrick Conrad going down the descent, but Sony Cabrelli is having all kinds of problems on this descent. At one point in time, starts to lose his back wheel on the right turn, has to straighten it up, and then start to follow David Gaudu again. They won't be able to close the gap to Patrick Conrad on the descent, and now Patrick Conrad's throwing everything into it. Sony Cabrelli's having problems now. The sprinter's gone over 3 big climbs already on this stage, and he did it following a pure climber from FDJ, David Gaudu. He can no longer pull. Even with David Gaudu, they'll sit up and go back to the group behind. That group will start to work well, but not good enough to catch Patrick Conrad, who is flying to the finish. Now, Patrick Conrad comes to the line solo on today's stage 16 and a great victory salute. In his interview after the stage, he talked about what he had already learned at this year's Tour de France. Now, the Austrian hasn't won a race outside of his home country throughout his entire career. He does have 2 top 10s, both in the Giro d'Italia in 2018 and 2020. So he can ride the bike. We all know his name that follows cycling closely. And when you get 2 top 10s in Grand Tours, you know you're a quality rider, but he doesn't have any wins. Today's stage was his first win outside of Austria, and it's at the Tour de France. When he's in the interview, he explains his tactics on today's stage. He was previously in the break on stage 7 with Mohoric when Mohoric left the group with about 80 kilometers to go, I believe, and then dropped his breakaway companion and soloed into the finish. Then he was in the break on stage 14 that Bach Mollema won, and he watched Bach Mollema win with 45 kilometers to go going solo. So he said today's stage, his motivation for going solo from so far out were those 2 previous stages that he thought and hoped would come back together but never did. So he learned his lessons from stage 7 and 14 and decided the best way to win a stage at the Tour de France is just to solo it. Why not? Behind in what was left of the breakaway guys, Sony Cabrelli does a great job of getting second on a mountain stage. He already has the mountain stage that summited at teens where he was third on the stage, and now today second on the stage to gain some points on the green jersey. Michael Matthews, who had a fabulous ride too. Another sprinter that was able to stay with the climbers on today's stage and finish third and grab more green jersey points. It's starting to tighten up a little bit on the points jersey back there to Mark Cavendish. Back in the GC favorites, it looked like the gas was going to be off the whole second half of the field, but that wasn't the case. I told you at the beginning of the show, the Category 4 was going to hold some excitement, and it did. They rolled into the Category 4. It's only 800 meters long, and it's Cofidis Guillaume Martin's team who's drilling it over the top. Wout van Aert, Jumbo-Visma, it just flies by them. I don't even know if he realized how much of a gap he had, but it split it to the favorite, top 10 GC favorites, and a couple extra domestiques back there. Wout van Aert realizes the gap that he's made. He starts drilling it down the descent. This was a crazy tactic, but it was fun to watch. If anything, when tactics are strange, it always makes for great viewing. Wout van Aert is throwing it through all of the corners. He's got his team back there in safe position right on his wheel, but the guys in the back have to be swinging because every corner they're flying through at Mach speed. They'll come into the finish. It's a slight uphill rise. Wout van Aert will pull off, and they'll just start battling it out amongst the GC. Carapaz leading towards the line will just come across right ahead of Tadej Pogačar, who will give him a little smile and look to his left. It was a great day of racing, really. The first 80K was exciting. The second 80K to the finish with the breakaway riders was exciting to watch. And then the last 8 kilometers of the stage amongst the GC guys battling out, when you know if anybody messes up on these corners, they're going to lose time quick because it's Wout van Aert on the front for Jumbo-Visma. Now going forward to stage 17 and 18, UAE Team Emirates have been fantastic since stage 9 of this year's Tour de France, and tomorrow they need to continue the same tactics. There's a 90-kilometer flat section in tomorrow's stage, and then stage 18 has a 70-kilometer flat section before the climbing starts. Both stages are incredibly crucial if Tadej Pogačar wants to win this year's Tour de France. If there's any part where he could be in danger, it's the flat sections. If he was to miss a split in the peloton, whichever GC teams that have made the front half split will work together and do a combine. You'll see 3-4 teams drive in the front if there's crosswinds, and UAE Team Emirates have missed it. Now, one thing I want to point out about today's stage 16 is at one point in time, UAE Team Emirates had lost 3 or 4 riders in the split on today's stage. Every time the camera had gone back to that group, I'd seen UAE Team Emirates on the front of that second group chasing as hard as they can so that they could reattach to Tadej Pogačar's group. Once the breakaway had finally gotten away from the field, that front group had sat up. Because UAE Team Emirates were chasing back there, they reattached with Tadej Pogačar, and he had basically his full team on the front for the rest of the stage to look after him. Tomorrow's stage, absolutely crucial. If anything happens in the first half of that stage, he needs to have as many guys with him as he possibly can from his team so that they can bring that split back. When the climbing starts, I'm not worried about Tadej Pogačar because he looks fantastic. But if he can have 2 strong guys to get him over the first climb on each stage, both tomorrow and 18, he's going to be able to wrap up this Tour de France. They got one flat stage after the next 2 that he's going to need the team for again, but we all know if they can get him over that first climb on tomorrow and stage 18, he's going to look fantastic, and he can take care of himself on the last climb of each of those stages. Stage 18 is going to be a fantastic stage because it's only 80 miles long, so everybody is going to have good legs on the last 2 climbs, which means it's going to be really aggressive and hard racing up the last 2 and certainly up the summit to the finish. If the Butterfly Effect jersey caught your eye, I'll post up the link right here and you can pick them up from the merchandise store. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you real soon.